All right. We also, Mike, of course, have NC State taking on Vanderbilt, and NC State, a team that got off to a good start, stumbled mid-season. And these are both schools that needed wins, upset wins late just to get to postseason play. So for NC State, it was an upset against North Carolina, a game in which they really dominated the first half, surprisingly, as a big underdog. And for Vandy, they beat Ole Miss and Tennessee down the stretch to get to 6-6. So at the Independence Bowl, interesting matchup with a couple 6-6 teams.
Yeah, and you want to talk about teams that won the games that they were supposed to. I mean, that's kind of what we say when we talk about NC State, with the exception of the Boston College game, which for whatever reason, NC State really didn't show up for offensively. They really struggled. Ryan Finley, especially at the quarterback position, he was pretty good most of the year, but he really struggled in that Boston College game, what ended up being a 21-14 loss to the Eagles. You look at Ryan Finley on the year. Nearly 3,000 yards passing, 15 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. When he's taking care of the ball, passing wise, North Carolina State's been really good because their defense has been so stout this year. They run the ball extremely well. Matt Day's over 1,100 yards rushing here in his senior campaign, 10 touchdowns. He'll try to cap it off here in the bowl game against Vanderbilt and go out on the right note to end his collegiate career. A guy that we could definitely see playing on Sundays here in the near future. I really like NC State in this game because looking at Vanderbilt, I mean, they struggled through a tough SEC schedule, obviously. Beat Tennessee at the end of the year. They beat Mississippi. There are a lot of good wins on Vanderbilt's schedule, but there are also some questionable losses. The one that sticks out to me is the one in early November when they lost to Missouri, a game that Vanderbilt definitely should have won. They lost that game 26-17, a game that wasn't nearly as close as what the final score indicates. Their quarterback, Kyle Shermer, the issue with him has been throwing interceptions. He's 9 touchdowns, only 7 picks on the year, 2,200 yards passing. You got to take care of the football, and Vanderbilt's similar in style to North Carolina State in that they want to run first, but when they throw the ball through the air, it's really a crapshoot whether or not they're going to succeed in that regard, just because the turnovers have been a problem. Webb at running back there for Vanderbilt, over 1,100 yards and 12 touchdowns. He's very similar to Matt Day's, very similar type of runner, can get north and south in a hurry, but can also make people miss. Because of that, I think this will be a battle going back and forth throughout most of the game. I think it'll be relatively high scoring, even though both teams have competent defenses. I think the offenses are good enough in this one. I'm going to take NC State here over Vanderbilt just because I think the caliber of team that NC State has played here, you look at Vanderbilt in the SEC, most of their schedule in the SEC East. I mean, they had a lot of weaker teams that they played against this year. I like NC State because of the schedule they've played. They succeeded. They're obviously coming in with some momentum, even though it was a while ago. They did beat North Carolina to end their season. I think that's a big win to springboard the Wolfpack into this bowl game because, look, NC State, they weren't even supposed to be in the bowl game. They win that game, of course, to get to bowl eligibility, and I think they'll succeed here in the Camping World Independence Bowl and beating Vanderbilt.
Talk about bad passing attacks. Vandy's been awful in throwing the football downfield for quite a long time, but they somehow caught something in a bottle over the last few games. Kyle Shermer hit up Ole Miss for 221 and a couple of scores, and then against Tennessee in the finale, again, to get them bowl eligible against what many would consider a much superior team athletically. 416 yards and 2 touchdowns. If you like defensive play, Zach Cunningham on the Vandy side is so good. He got consideration for SEC Player of the Year as a defensive player at Vandy. He's that good. 119 tackles, 16 and a half tackles for loss. Vandy also won a game against Georgia. And Georgia's not great this year. It's a down Georgia team, but it's still a pretty substantial 7-5 team, a pretty talented team. And they took Auburn to the hilt on the road. Vandy had an impressive season. There's no doubt about it. And one other interesting note here is going to be when NC State gets into the red zone. They are one of the worst. Vandy, one of the best in the country in red zone defense. Let's see. Offense is inside the 20, coming up empty a whopping 12 times, including it at least once in the last 9 games of the season. So they turned back and stiffened inside the 20.